Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to 4 remote sites, I think. We've got people in Cape Ann, Saskatoon, Canada, Austin, Texas, and New York City, I think, joining us via the magic of the internet. And I'd like to especially thank Dima and Brandon and Peter for putting this all together for us. So the title of the talk, and I'll try to limit my remarks to an hour or so we have plenty of time to discuss. But the title of the talk, the official title, is Remembering and Forgetting, the Place of Memory in a Spiritual Practice. And this has been somewhat of an obsession with me lately. And I don't know, maybe it's just a function of old age, where, first of all, you got way more memories because you just lived longer. And but then you forget more too. And so, personally, I'm just kind of interested in it. And I think it has, I think it's an extremely important topic for those of us trying to, live a spiritual life and follow the guidelines of the spiritual traditions. Because it seems to me that the spiritual traditions are sending opposing messages, sending conflicting messages when it comes to the question of memory and forgetting. And so I'll go into that, in this evening's talk. And so, we'll cover both sides. I mean, obviously, it's important to, cultivate a good memory, obviously. Some of the most important spiritual virtues depend on memory. Like, for example, forgiveness. You can't practice forgiveness if you forgot. You know what I mean? Gratitude, same deal, right? So, it's obvious, and it's important, when you, if you join a community like this one and, take teachings over time and so forth, to remember what you heard a little bit, at least, and to have that kind of sink in and change, the course of your way you think and the way you act in the world. So it's obviously important. But there may be, especially at the later levels of a spiritual practice, an equal, if not more important, role for forgetting. So that I'll talk about towards the second half of the talk. The Sanskrit word that's up here on my super duper PowerPoint presentation. This is my first my PowerPoint virgin maiden voyage here. And Cindy fancied it all up, so you can thank her for that. But so we'll give this a go, see how I do, okay? It gives you something to look at besides me, that's all right. Smriti, say Smriti. Smriti. Yeah, Smriti. Sounds like one of the Smurfs, doesn't it? Smriti is a Sanskrit word that's translated in generally with 2 different English words. One is memory. So smriti, or sometimes smarana, you see. Smriti means memory or remembering. And it's also been translated, the very same word, okay? Not 2 words, very same word as mindfulness. And this is a buzzword nowadays, right? Mindfulness is the new yoga. You can get on the ground floor of mindfulness, make a bunch of money, okay? So everyone's talking about mindfulness. Mindful. At one level, mindfulness just means remembering. I mean, it's the same word. It's the same word, but it, has a slightly different connotation when you say mindfulness as opposed to remember. So, you could argue that mindfulness is kind of a form of memory. You're remembering to pay attention, right? You're remembering to be here now. And I'll go into what mindfulness is, okay? For no extra charge tonight, you will learn everything you need to know about mindfulness, okay? It's actually very simple. It just means pay attention. Pay attention to what's happening, that's all. And then you could go and take weekend seminars and pay a lot of money and all like that to have somebody tell you basically the same thing over, 48 hours or something. So it's just all it means to pay attention. Wake up, keep awake, right? So it's interesting to me anyway that this word, this one Sanskrit word, has been understood by the translators into English as having these two kind of, related but maybe different meanings. And what I'm going to argue tonight, and we'll see, whether you agree or not, is that in both cases, memory, remembering, and being mindful, there is an importance to cultivate them, and it's also important to drop them. Both. Probably at different times, because you can't do two things simultaneously, but, in the course of your spiritual practice, it's important to cultivate memory. And it's certainly important to cultivate mindfulness. Better to be mindful than to be mindless, right? And, most of us are walking around all day long pretty mindlessly, not paying attention, right? But there's downsides to this. Here's one, okay? If you are overly mindful, I think you can be excessively mindful. How's that? Yeah. Go too far. You can go beyond the limits of reasonable mindfulness. If you are excessively mindful, who are you thinking about all the time? Yeah. Hi, Zari. You're self-conscious. Yeah. You could even argue that another name for mindfulness is self-consciousness. Yep. Self-awareness. Sometimes they use that word as a kind of a synonym for mindfulness, self-awareness. And, some of the Buddha heads in the room are already kind of going, wait. Because we're not supposed to be, overly obsessed with ourselves in a spiritual training, and not just Buddhism. That's kind of a universal teaching in all the world religions, all the major traditions, is, practice self-forgetting, right? Pay attention to other people. Pay attention to the world around you. Don't just obsess about what's going on in your head, in your body. And so that would seem to argue against mindfulness, or at least excessive mindfulness. And you got the same kind of problem with memory. It's important to remember. It's important to, to remember the kindnesses that people have shown you. It's important to remember the difficulties you've had in the past so you don't repeat them over and over again. You can't learn without memory, right? Learning requires memory. But staying in your memory all the time precludes being in the present, doesn't it? I've often said this, I've touched on this theme in both of the books actually that I wrote, and so on, tours and stuff, I, say over and over and over again. But, the whole point of a spiritual life is to learn how to live happily in the present. And so if you're constantly remembering, you're not living in the present. And you're not pursuing, at a certain level, you could say, you're not chasing the real goal of a spiritual life, which is to forget, you could argue. To forget about what happened, and to stop thinking about what you think is going to happen. So, what do you reckon? How much percentage of your mind is spent thinking about what's happened or thinking about what you think will happen? Maybe 90%, 95% for an average person. So we actually are living in the present very, very little, which is the only time there is, the only reality that there is, okay? So I'm, just kind of laying out what we'll go through in a more systematic way in the talk. On the potential problems, the advantages, the pluses of developing memory and being mindful, but also the disadvantages of being overly mindful, overly memorable. Overly stuck in remembering, overly too much. All right, so that's the whole deal about smriti, memory and mindfulness. So let's start with some discussion about the general importance of memory in not just in the Indian-based traditions, but in all of them. Oh yeah, I can do this. Watch this, guys. What am I doing? Huh? Oh, I thought it was supposed to be up. I forgot. Mircea Eliade was one of my professors 40 years ago at the University of Chicago. He's, you know, as time passes, he becomes less and less known, but he was probably among the 2 or 3 top students of comparative religion in the last century. I mean, right up there with Joseph Campbell and people like that who people still remember. So my professor taught me long time ago, you know, that religions are all about memory. They're all about memory. This is a quotation from one of his famous books called The Sacred and the Profane. The whole religious life is a commemoration, a remembering. The true sin is forgetting. He's talking about what he called homo religiosus. You know, because if you're in the academic world, you have to put things in Latin to make it sound, you know, really official. A religious person. For a religious person, the true sin is forgetting. And, you know, this is true at all kinds of levels. But a spiritual tradition, or any tradition actually, is all about remembering. That's what makes it a tradition, right? Is that you remember what happened before, what somebody else said, what other people did, and you preserve it. You change it, always. Tradition is always changing. But if it's going to be a tradition, it's also got to have some kind of core that doesn't change, that's just being replicated. We remember in spiritual traditions the paradigmatic sayings and actions of the religious founder. You know, what did Buddha say? You know, what did Jesus say, right? And we remember it over and over again. We preserve it. We remember the scriptures. We preserve the scriptures. That's why there are scriptures. It's because somebody preserved them for thousands of years in most cases, right? So a myth is a story that's been told over and over and over again. And that's kind of what makes a myth a myth. And the story that the myth tells is a story about what happened in the time before time, in the time before historical time, or you could say transcendent time, where it's always, you know, now, where it's always relevant, right? Myths are not just streets. Myths are constantly relevant. And we remember those stories and we tell them over and over and over again in religious traditions. A ritual is never done for the first time, okay? It's a little bit of a paradox. Like, for example, I don't know how many of you grew up in, you know, with Christianity, but you're living in a sort of a Christian nation, maybe going to be more Christian soon. So you probably know about the Eucharist, right? This is the central ritual of the Christian tradition, taking the wine and the bread in a symbolic fashion. And that was the first time that was done. It was not a ritual. It was dinner. No, Jesus had a dinner. He had the Last Supper with all his disciples. And then at some point, somebody said, hey, you know, remember when we had that dinner with Jesus? Let's do that again. And then it becomes a ritual. So a ritual is, by definition, repeated activity. Remembered. Yeah, remember when we did that? Let's do that again and again and again, over and over again. So in general, you could argue, you know, the remembering, is central to what we call, you know, religions or spiritual traditions in all kinds of ways, right? Yeah. So this is also the case, you know, in Indian traditions. I don't have a slide for this, but the basic division in Hinduism, in the history of Hinduism, is between what's called Shruti and Smriti. Shruti is the Vedas. These are the Vedas. This is like revealed, wisdom from Alpha Centauri. Smriti is remembered. It's remembering what the teachers taught you, remembering what the famous teachers of the past taught and repeating it over and over again. So there's one application of smriti. There's lots more, and I'll kind of go through a few of them. I see a lot of people from the yoga world in the house here. This is Yoga Sutra 120. For others, i.e. embodied beings, never mind about that. It's, just because of the last couple of verses. There must first be confidence, joyful effort, smriti, which, okay, you can translate it. Mindfulness is my translation, so I did. But you could also say remembering. Full integration, which is, I think, the best translation for the word samadhi. And then wisdom, jnana. So it made it into the top 5 virtues, arguably, of the Yoga Sutra. Pay attention, remember, don't forget. In fact, you could say it's like, it's right before samadhi. Confidence, you say, confidence, shraddha, faith. Joyful effort, be happy about working hard for your spiritual life. And then mindfulness. Then don't forget what it is you're about in life, right? Don't forget your training. Don't forget your spiritual goals and your aspirations like that. Don't space out. And that will lead you to, full integration, samadhi, and wisdom. So there it is from the Yoga Sutra. And same in Buddhism. This is the Eightfold Path, which people who study Mahayana Buddhism should study more. This was, in the Pali text, the kind of outline of the whole of Buddha Dharma, the whole of what the Buddha was, teaching us to do. Samyak, you see that in front of all the Sanskrit. Samyak just means right or correct. Correct view, drishti, understanding like how things are. Correct intention, sankalpa, having the right intention. Right speech, don't lie, don't, slander people, etc. Right action, right karmanta, same word as karma, basically. Right livelihood, don't make money off of other people's pain. Right effort, this is kind of the same idea as virya, for those of you who know, joyful effort. And then there it is again, samyak smriti. Right memory and mindfulness, / mindfulness, okay? Keeping in mind that you can translate that Sanskrit word either one of those 2 ways. And then right concentration, which is some earlier understanding of, or my own earlier understanding of samadhi. I should have updated it. Right integration again, samadhi, right concentration, integration. So look where it appears in the Eightfold Path, penultimate. It's like, so, again, you could argue that these things are kind of, building. They build on each other. And here, right memory is kind of like up at the top of the pyramid. So here's another context for it. This is from the Pali canon. The Sapta Bodhyanga, anga, the limbs, bodhi of bodhi. Sapta means 7, the 7 factors of enlightenment. And that one, number 1, sati. Sati is the Pali for smriti. Memory, investigation of reality, dhamma vichaya, understanding like how things really are. Effort, joy, tranquility, concentration, equanimity, and so forth. The point here is to just show you how often it appears. And in kind of central places in the, in the Buddhist teachings, this idea of memory or mindfulness. Oh, and then for the more adventuresome, the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra is a really incredible text. If you don't know, there's English translations published and so forth. It gives 112 methods for kind of instantaneously falling into what they call Bhairava consciousness, which is, in the Buddhist tradition, they probably call it emptiness. In Mahayana Buddhism, or, pure consciousness or something like that. To fall into an enlightened state instantaneously. So here's one method. The bliss that comes when one is in union with Shakti, that would be, your girlfriend. And one loses oneself in her. So what does that mean? You forget yourself. Okay, so now memory and forgetting, right? So one loses oneself in her because of the intense excitement of the climax. That is the bliss of ultimate reality. So we, hopefully all of us have had experience of what ultimate reality is. No, we just thought it was something else, or we, spaced out. We just thought, that was good. What next, And we didn't really pay attention to what happened to us. What happened to us? Where did we go? What kind of experience did we really have? That is the bliss of ultimate reality, and is said to come from oneself. You see? It's not the partner, actually, that gives you bliss. It comes from your own potential for bliss, you see? Your own, you could say, Buddha nature in the Buddhist tradition. So you're accessing your Buddha nature in these times of complete ecstasy. And in the times of complete ecstasy, you're not there. You see? You say your name to yourself. If you are there, you're not having a very good orgasm. I can tell you. If you're going, oh, yes, I'm having, okay, yeah, I have. If you're conscious, right? If you're self-conscious, the whole point of that blissful experience, it's not just orgasm. There are other types of experience where we have this same sort of loss of the self and merger with something greater than ourselves. Yeah, a sense of merger with something greater. And this text says that's exactly what Bhairava consciousness is. That's exactly what emptiness is. That's exactly what, pure consciousness, ultimate reality is. So, it's kind of encouraging, I think, that many of these texts, not just this one wacky one, many of these texts teach us that we have regular opportunity to experience what enlightenment would be like. Regular. So we should pay attention to that, maybe. So again, mindful. But what are you being mindful of? You're kind of mindful retroactively, right? Because if you're mindful during the ecstatic experience, you're not having the ecstatic experience, right? Because you're self-conscious. It precludes ecstatic experience. Mindfulness, in this sense, self-awareness, self-consciousness, precludes the ecstasy that these texts say is, what a kind of a peep into the enlightened state. So this thing, I'll just riff on this text for a while. These verses I've taken in order, so this is how it kind of goes in the original, the sequence. Next one. O Queen of the Gods, even without Shakti present. And, for many of us, Shakti isn't present all the time, especially, you're not in orgasm all the time, let's put it that way. Just from the intensity of the memory of the bliss that comes from kissing, embracing, and stroking a woman, one becomes immersed in bliss. So what's this about? Memory, right? Memory as a practice, where you're remembering. You're remembering a time where you were not self-conscious, right? You're remembering a time when you weren't remembering. You weren't mindful. Yeah. And then this is just, like I said, right in sequence here, the next one. When one experiences great bliss, or when one sees a long-lost relative. A long-lost relative is someone that you have kept in your memory, right? You've kept them in your heart. You've kept them in your memory. And now you see them again, and you feel so good. Oh, it's so good to see you again. You should meditate on the arising of the bliss and thoroughly dissolve the mind into it. Dissolving the mind into bliss is kind of like the basic teaching of this whole text. Dissolve and so you find little tricks to do it. Well, here's one. Here's another one. Remember how long it's been since you saw, your mom or your sister, your long lost friend or something like that. And generate that kind of bliss that comes from memory. You see? Wouldn't have that memory if it's like, I'm seeing you for the first time, right? Yeah. All right. So let me see where I'm at with my PowerPoint presentation here. Yeah. So the point here is that there's this tension. There's a tension between a positive aspect of memory and a kind of a need to forget in order to achieve the kind of, higher states of a spiritual life. Everyone all right with that so far? Yeah. Seems like it, doesn't it? Seems like they're trying to, there's a bit of a paradox almost, okay? So I thought we'd take a little excursion here, briefly, to talk about mindfulness, because I don't want like people going away going, I shouldn't be mindful or something like that. But I also like promised you, for no extra charge, to give you all you need to know about mindfulness in one PowerPoint slide. Okay, this is all you need to know. Seriously. This comes from the ur-text of the whole mindfulness movement. This is the one every legitimate mindfulness, tradition traces itself back to this text. This is called the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. It's in Pali. So these are called the 4 pillars of mindfulness. The 4 pillars. What are they? First, one who is watching the body stays focused on the body with fierce intensity, awareness, and mindfulness, detaching from worldly longing and repugnance, raga and dvesha. Okay? So pay attention to your body. Okay, that's number 1 pillar. One who is watching the feelings stays focused on the feelings with fierce intensity, awareness, and mindfulness. One who is watching the state of mind stays focused on the state of mind with fierce intensity, awareness, and mindfulness. They do this repetition because like it was all memorized, so it helped people remember. And one who is watching thoughts stays focused on thoughts with fierce intensity, awareness, and mindfulness. That's mindfulness right there, okay? That's all you need to know. Pay attention to what's going on in your body. Pay attention when feelings arise. Pay attention to your state of mind. Pay attention to the thoughts that are arising. That's all mindfulness is, okay? Yeah. So here's another text, another concept that's very similar to mindfulness, as probably you all know, is meditation. And you could argue that meditation is a form of remembering too. Bhavana in Sanskrit means to, habituate yourself to a thing. Gom in Tibetan, right? A gompa is where you go to meditate, but gom itself means doing something over and over and over again until it becomes partly like second nature to you, right? So meditation itself is a form of memory, of remembering over and over again. This is from a text called the Bhavana, the meditation krama, the steps to meditation by a Buddhist teacher, Kamalashila. This is in a section about obstacles to samadhi. Obstacles to full integration. For those of you who don't know, samadhi is just another of the millions of names that people have invented for the ultimate state, for the goal, for the state that cannot be named. Because as soon as you name the state, you've already distorted it. You've already messed it up. So this is one of the obstacles to meditation include drifting away from what's happening. As we all know, anybody who's tried to meditate knows that this is a very common obstacle to meditation, right? You sit down to meditate and you start thinking about dinner. That's an obstacle to meditation. You're drifting away. And what's the antidote to it? Mindfulness, smriti. Or you could say memory. Remember what you sat down to meditate on, right? Don't let the mind drift away. Put a little sort of metaphorical string around your finger to remember what you're doing here, okay? So this is just kind of a little bit of a survey of, mindfulness and in the Buddhist texts. Here's one more. Am I on 11 now? I lost track of my own numbers. No, I am. Okay, never mind. Got it. This PowerPoint thing is complicated. This is from chapter 5 of the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which many of you know quite well, actually. Those who have not cultivated the mind, which is the secret soul behind all the teachings. That's a very interesting way of thinking about what all spiritual training is all about. Cultivating the mind. Behind the secret soul, the essence of all the teachings is to, get us to train our minds, to cultivate our minds. Those who have not cultivated the mind, which is the secret soul behind all the teachings, aimlessly wander all over the place, trying to eliminate suffering and obtain happiness without success. And then a couple of verses down, I entreat, this is Shantideva, I entreat those, he's pleading with us, who wish to guard their minds to make every effort to keep watch over their mindfulness and full awareness. All right, so, you know, kind of like, there's no subtlety there, you know. You got to do this. You got to train your mind. You got to, and be mindful and have full awareness to achieve the spiritual goal. Okay? Now we'll go to the problem. Now we'll come to the second side of the coin, the problematic nature of smriti. You know, if you're always thinking about your mind or the four pillars, your body, your feelings, your state of mind, and your thoughts, you're totally obsessing about yourself, right? In fact, you could say that excessive mindfulness is neurosis. Because that's what neurosis is, isn't it? Just like constantly thinking of yourself. Self-awareness and mindfulness are forms of self-obsession. And nobody is teaching that the goal is to be even more obsessed with yourself than you already are. So at best, memory and mindfulness can be only a tool that lead to the opposite. That lead to the opposite of what they're training it to do, which is, you know, that's okay. You know, it's important for a spiritual practitioner to be able to entertain paradox, to entertain, you know, contradiction, to keep two contradictory ideas in your mind at the same time. Nope, shouldn't be too much of a problem. The problem that we see, you know, and have always seen in spiritual traditions is when people or whole traditions think there's an absolute right and there's an absolute wrong. There's this black and there's this white. We live in gray area only. Only. People who think that there are black and whites in life are the people who are, you know, running trucks into people in Nice. And they're not just Muslims. And they're not just conservatives, you know. There are liberal fundamentalists too, who think that their way of thinking, their way of doing things is the only way, is the only correct way, and everybody else is wrong. So that's also for no extra charge. No, embrace the gray areas of life. That's where we live. Life is complicated. Other people are complicated. You know, none of us is absolutely good or absolutely bad. And all of us make mistakes. And so, you know, it's not clear-cut. And it's oftentimes not clear-cut what the right thing to do is in life. So our spiritual traditions, you know, sometimes give us guidelines, but those same spiritual traditions will sometimes give us contradictory teachings on what the guidelines should be. So I think, you know, putting a finger on one of an example of that, where on one hand, they're saying, you know, remember, be mindful, you know, don't forget. And on the other hand, they're saying, forget about it. Let go. Stop obsessing about yourself. Stop obsessing about the past. Live fully in the present. So I thought I kind of outlined three problems with memory, all right? We'll see how this goes. The first problem is memory is constitutive of what we call the self. We are who we think we are as individual people because of our memories. What do you reckon? Agree with that? Who would you be if you had no memory? And actually, the neuroscientists and stuff like that are very intrigued with this question. They're studying like Alzheimer's, you know, victims and so forth, because they literally lose their selves without memory. They literally do not know who they are. And so memory makes us who we are as individuals. And according to Buddhism, and I don't think it's just Buddhism either, there's the problem right now, right there. There's the problem, grasping to self. Ever heard that expression before? An Atman, no self. So we grasp to an illusion that is created by memory. Okay, that's a big problem with memory, it would seem. Here's, before we get to the Buddhism part, this is you know, I just raided the internet a little bit. I don't know that much about it. These are a couple of social scientists from the University of California and University of Arizona who published an article called Memory and the Sense of Personal Identity. So here's just a little quote from that. Memory is at the heart of the way most people think about personal identity. It is because I remember my first kiss that I think I'm the same person as that awkward adolescent. If I had no memory of past experiences, the sense that I existed in the past would be dramatically compromised, kind of, to say the least. Memory also is at the heart of philosophical discussions of personal identity. Memories of past actions go towards constituting personal identity. There's apparently a long tradition in Western philosophy that argues this too. I haven't researched enough to be able to speak intelligently about it, but it goes back to at least John Locke, who's the, I think, 18th century philosopher. Yeah, saying that we are who we are because of memory. Memory constitutes us as persons, as individual personalities. So the Buddhist tradition would certainly agree with this, I think. Here's a couple of more Sanskrit words to throw into the mix. Samskara, say samskara. And then vasana. Yeah, how many of you have not heard of these words before? Have not heard. Oh, so everyone's familiar? No, you guys are. Okay, so otherwise I was just going to go on, you know. These are two words you could say that mean memory. Samskara, I just put down, you know, some you know, kind of dictionary definitions for both of these. Mental formations, conditioning factors, volitional activities, karmic imprints for samskara. And then for vasana, past impressions, habitual tendencies, and again, karmic imprints. So if you wanted to, you could use karmic imprints as the translation for both of these words. Karmic imprint means something, you know, occurs, something happens to you that makes a, you know, a conscious impression on you, and that gets locked into your memory. It gets imprinted. They like a brand that you would put on a cow or something like that. It makes an imprint on your mind, and then that stays there, and again makes you who you are. Right? I'll put it like this, okay, just to, you know, be as clear as possible. We are who we think we once were. Okay? We aren't who we once were, that's for sure, right? Because people change all the time. And our memories are not what actually happened. They're what we think happened, right? And they change all the time. Every time you remember something, you change it, okay? We're not computers. We're not just like spitting back data from the past, okay? We're constantly revising and editing and interpreting our memories. Even our experiences aren't what actually happened. Even at the time, right? They're what we think happened. And then, you know, as we hold them in our memories, or as you could say, in our conscious, subconscious, or unconscious, because that's kind of what these concepts refer to in Buddhism. You can have memories that are unconscious. As modern psychology has, you know, kind of agreed for 150 years now, since Freud at least, that we can have unconscious memories, right? And then there's subconscious ones, which we're kind of vague about, and there's the conscious ones. Oh, I remember what happened, you know, back in 1962, right? So these are the, you know, these are the Sanskrit words, and I'll show you how they function in Buddhism for the repository of memory, you could say. And they function in a very important way in Buddhism. Those of you who've studied Buddhism know that the self, the so-called self, is really just an idea projected on what they call the 5 aggregates or heaps, skandhas. On the basis of the 5 parts of the self, we say there must be a self. And by a self here, I mean a personal self, number one. So it's you say your name to yourself, okay? So if you're Shuddy, it would be Shuddy. If it was me, it'd be Maru, you know. So you say that self. That self we think is unitary, number one, right? It's not like a whole bunch of us in there, unless you're, you know, in need of some help. Unitary, unchanging. It's the same, I'm the same self that I was when I was 4 years old. There's some basic unchangingness to me. That's what makes me me. So again, you could argue that memory functions to shore that up. You know, because I have memories of when I was 4 years old, I must have been there. You know what I mean? Right? So there must be a me. So unchanging me. Memory kind of provides a sort of artificial continuity over life. Like just overlays it. So what did I say? Unitary, unchanging, and independent. Independent means we're not just the sheer sum of our parts. Okay? There's something above and beyond the body and mind that's me. Okay? So that's self. So our self, that idea of the self, which is completely illusory, by the way, okay? If you go looking for that kind of self, it is absolutely unfindable. And I think some of you have done enough meditation of this sort to, you know, to be able to vouch for that. Maybe others of you should do a little bit of that kind of meditation. Find out who the hell you think you are and see if there's actually a you there that is who you think you are. So anyway, these are the 5 heaps upon which we, you know, overlay this idea of self. Rupa means form, physical form, you know, body and other physical forms. Feelings, the ability to discriminate means the ability to discriminate between sights, sounds, you know, tastes, and so forth. The five feelings, 5 physical feelings, and then also 6. In South Asia, they have a 6th sense, which is the mind. So the ability to discriminate between one kind of thought and another kind of thought. Okay, that's part of, you know, kind of what we're made of. The ability to discriminate. Consciousnesses, the ability to be conscious of what I saw. Okay, see, when we see something with our eyeball, we actually don't see it. We have to be conscious of seeing something with our eyeball for us to really see it. So similarly, consciousnesses of all the 5 senses, and including the mind, the 6th sense, consciousness of you know what you're thinking, and then samskara, which I just put memories here. If you do some research, if you're interested at all in such things, the Buddhist tradition like throws a whole lot of stuff into that category. The whole lot of what remains, you know, in our mental, you know, kind of makeup. It's kind of a grab bag. But if you look at it, if you look at the list, I mean, they're long lists, like 48, 52, they can't quite make up their mind how many things go into samskara. But if you look at the list, you could argue that they're all forms of memory. They're all types of memory, okay? So our memories, you know, point here is, in Buddhism, they say our memories help to make us who we are. I mean, you can't like just have memories. You got to have a body, you know. So you have to have these other ones: form, rupa. You have to have feelings, and so it can't just be all memory. But it's certainly a huge, important component of who we think we are. Is our memories, right? It also appears in what's called the 12 links of dependent origination. You know, again, if you're not studied in Buddhism, don't worry about this kind of stuff. If you are studied in Buddhism, pay attention to how often it appears. Mental formations is another translation for what? Samskara or vasana. Is it vasana or samskara in the 12 links? It's samskara in the 12 links, right? Yeah. So ignorance is the number. This is the, you know, the chain of you know, kind of like why we suffer over and over and over again. Dependent co-origination, something. They have like all kinds of fancy names for it. But it's kind of just a kind of the circle of links that keep us, you know, suffering. And ignorance is, you know, always like regarded as the number one problem, not just in Buddhism and yoga traditions and Hindu traditions too. Ignorance is number one. We don't know what's what. But right after ignorance in this presentation is the mental formations, is memories. So out of ignorance, we think, well, it's hard to say this because the next one's necessary. Consciousness. So consciousness is a direct, you know, kind of implication, a subsequent, you know, kind of unfolding from memory. It's kind of interesting to think that. Could you be conscious without memory? Could you be conscious of anything without memory? And I'll tell you why you couldn't in a minute here, okay? Which is another problem of memory. We are not conscious of things. I'll just give you a little clue, okay? We're not conscious of things or events or other people. We're conscious of our ideas of them. And where did those ideas come from? Memory, from the past. Because we've had ideas like that before, concepts like that before, we reapply them over and over and over again to new situations, to new people and so forth. So it's kind of interesting how important this idea is of memory, in these traditions. And this is problem number one. Problem number one is that memory, the emphasis on memory, reinforces our false sense of self. Okay? Buddhism is quite adamant. If there's one doctrine that all Buddhist traditions would buy into, there are actually three, but one of them is anatman. There is no self the way you think that there's a self. It's an illusion. But our memories create that illusion and sustain it. You see? So is memory a solution or a problem? Here's the second problem of memory. This is a term that many of you guys know, klesha. Klesha is usually translated as mental afflictions or something like that. Mental afflictions are anything that disturb your peace of mind. So I always do this, I'll do it again. How many mental afflictions have you had so far today, do you think? 4? 12? 130? A gajillion? A gajillion is actually the right one. Okay? Every moment we're having either subtle or full-blown versions of mental affliction. There's no way of putting this. There's always something wrong. There's always something wrong physically. There's always something wrong mentally. And there's nothing wrong physically. I feel pretty good. I'm young. I do yoga, But I bet you dimes to donuts that you got a hemorrhoid or something, or a little owie somewhere, a little mosquito bite. There's always something wrong with the body. What about the mind? There's always something wrong with the mind. Even at our happiest moments, it's not absolutely pure. So kleshas are anything that disturb the peace of mind, our peace of mind. And you could argue, as I'm going to, that what kleshas are habitual emotional responses. In other words, they're remembered. Yeah, we have mental afflictions because we've had them in the past. Just to kind of go through it. These are the 5 big ones according to the Yoga Sutra. The 5 mental afflictions, 5 pancha kleshas, are ignorance, again, always ignorance, and number 1. Egoism is a great word in Sanskrit, asmita. Asmi is the first person singular of the verb to be. Okay? How many people learn grammar in their education? It means I am, asmi. And ta is equivalent to the suffix ness in English. So it's I amness, literally. Okay, so egoism, attraction, raga, aversion, dvesha, and abhinivesha, grasping. So that's a very, very short list, and Buddhism has very, very similar understandings of what the 5 big ones are, and then there are kind of infinite subversions of each one of these. Practically infinite. Leo Tolstoy. Happy people have no history. Kleshas, as I mentioned, are habitual emotional responses. So you find yourself in a situation like, for example, being in gridlock on the 405. And because you've been in situations like that in the past, your inclination is to have the same emotional response that you had in the past. These are learned. These are habits. And, you know, some people's inclination is to get all angry and start honking their horn and all of that, right? That's a klesha. That's a klesha that's been learned over time. You meet a new person, and that person, you know, reminds you of someone else that you knew in the past, and you have a learned and habitual emotional response to that person. I don't like you. Why? I just met you. Why don't you like me? Well, you remind me of somebody that I knew that I didn't like in the past, right? So the mental afflictions are emotional memory. Okay, they're emotional memory. And the job of a spiritual practitioner is, you know, is first of all to, you know, break the cycle and substitute a new response for you know, what you've been doing over and over and over again with your old habits, right? To substitute and start building, you know, new and better habits. But the whole arising of a klesha depends on memory. Depends on remembering how you used to feel, okay? And then even deeper than that, okay? We have the habitual response we have to situations because we think that the situation that we're in is just like what's happened before. Oh, this traffic jam on the 405 is just like the one last week. Okay, what's wrong with that picture? Problem number one with memory, it reinforces a false sense of self. Problem number two with memory, it is the mental afflictions. They are memory. Okay, the mental afflictions are emotional memory. And that's the problem. You know, the problem, what they say, karma and klesha, which are both kind of like repetitive actions. Yeah. And so, you know, maybe this is what Tolstoy meant. Happy people have no history, because happiness is the absence of kleshas, the absence of mental afflictions, and you will have mental afflictions as long as you have memory. So I promise to get to the third question, the third level of things, and that is perception. Perception itself. When I perceive the traffic jam on the 405, am I perceiving something that's already happened before or has never happened before? It's never happened before. Nothing has ever happened before. Okay? This is what impermanence means for those Buddha heads, okay? Which is another of the main tenets of Buddhism. Anatman, impermanence, and suffering. The three, what they call lakshanas, the three marks, definitive marks of what Buddhism is. So impermanence teaches us that nothing has ever happened, though exactly the same as it's happening now. Could we perceive it even? You see, in our ordinary way of thinking, if we didn't say, oh, this is just like something I've seen before. You see? This is a traffic jam. I know because I've been in traffic jams before. And this is just like that. Yeah? This person's just like somebody I knew before. Has this person, you know, brand new person that you meet in life, have you, they're not like anybody you've ever met before. By definition, right? Everybody's unique. Everybody's different. But we slap on these categories, perceptual categories, and say, oh, I know that. I know that because that's like something else I don't know, right? Let's do a pen. Shall we do a pen? Okay, everyone sees this and knows it's a pen, right? How do you know it's a pen? How? You've not seen this pen before? This is a brand new, unseen Tazari Barber pen. Absolutely unique object, isn't it? But we categorize it as something I've seen. It's like all those other unique things that I've, you know, seen before in the past that I categorized as non-unique things. Yeah, yeah. Okay, here's a little bit slightly deeper version of the same thing. When we look at this object, we are not seeing the object. We are seeing a pen. Okay? What's that French guy? This is not a pen? Magritte? Yeah. This is not a pen. Okay? This is an object. At best, it's not even an object, because object's another kind of category. You see, we see things not as they are, but as we think they are. So when we see an object like this, we think we're seeing a pen, but we're not really seeing the pen. We're seeing our idea. You see, we're seeing a concept. And where did that concept come from? See, from the past. Okay, so we're kind of perpetually living in the past. In our perceptions of things as they are unfolding, new every moment, completely unprecedented, right, in reality. But we don't live like that. So you could argue that we're living our whole lives in the past, because we see pens, we see glasses. Huh? What? You could argue that too. Yeah. Well, our memories, in this case, it's kind of unconscious, right? These are kind of epistemological categories. This is how we grasp the world, how we comprehend the world. So they're not really conscious memories, but they're certainly come from the past. We wouldn't know what this is unless we had a past experience that someone said, you're seeing a pen. So then we have the category pen. Mommy, what's this? It's pen. And so ever since our childhood, all our categories are learned, as children. And then we just see the world as we were taught to see the world. Okay? And we can't really see it in the normal way, any other way than that. Okay? So, in the normal way. So, the next part of the talk, am I going over? Probably so. Let me just summarize here, okay? The three problems that we outlined. With memory. Memory constitutes a false sense of self, number one. Memory is the mental afflictions. Emotional memory is the mental afflictions. Make the same kind of emotional mistakes over and over again. And thirdly, memory makes it impossible for us to see the world as it is, instead of as we think it is. All right? As we conceptualize it. Okay? We can't see the world as it is if we're applying the same old categories over and over again. In fact, you could say you can't see the world as it is if you apply any categories to it. So this is going to lead into the emphasis in the spiritual traditions of non-conceptual wisdom. Because all conceptual wisdom is automatically skewed. Because it's using words, using categories, and mistaking words and categories for the things themselves. Just a summary of the... I forgot this guy. If you're interested in this whole question about memory, Krishnamurti is one-stop shopping. He was obsessed with it. He had apparently some kind of Satori experience, at some, I think, rather early part of his life. And he said that in the wake of that Satori experience, he had complete amnesia about what had happened to him before in his previous life, in early part of it. He lost it. He lost complete memory. And then gradually it came back and back and back. And he argues in all kinds of ways that memory is a problem. There is a residue only when an experience is not fully understood, and there is no understanding of experience because we look at each experience through past memories. And therefore, we never meet the new as the new. That's what I was saying, remember? We never meet the new as the new, but always through the screen of the old. Therefore, it is clear that our response to experience is conditioned, always limited. So he's just kind of emphasizing that point I was making in discussing the third problem with memory. So this is just a little summary of our problems with memory in relation to the three lakshanas of Buddhism. Okay, the three definitive signs. Memory creates a false sense of a separate individual self versus anatman, no self, which is, you know, one of the three most important definitive teachings of Buddhist tradition. Memory, in the sense of samskara, predisposes us to repetitive, afflictive emotional responses over and over again, you know, getting angry at the, you know, that kind of person over and over and over again, versus suffering. That is suffering. That's dukkha. And then memory precludes seeing every event as new and unprecedented. And that's, you know, anicca. Anicca means everything's changing all the time. Nothing's ever the same. Nothing's ever the same, even moment to moment. At that level, it's changing. So these are a little summary of like the three problems with memory. So the last thing, the last part of what I wanted to say today is, you know, to conclude with a little bit of a mind experiment. Is it possible to live without memory? Is it desirable to live without memory? And I will show you some texts that seem to indicate that the enlightened state, the freedom, moksha, liberation, is a matter of getting rid of memory. And in order to live fully in reality as it is, right? Because memory precludes that. Okay? But then, you know, like, so I can show you the text and stuff, but how can we make sense of that? What kind of a mind would you have to have that had no memory? How could you exist, you know? It would be such a radical different state. And maybe it is. Maybe it's such a radically different state that we just simply cannot comprehend it. But maybe we can try a little bit. Krishnamurti himself and other of the people interested in memory and identity have argued that there are at least two kinds of memory. There's one kind of memory that you simply cannot live without. You could call it, I think Krishnamurti called it factual memory. The fact that fire burns, okay? If you didn't have the memory, the factual memory that fire burns, every time the stove was on, you'd touch it again, right? And burn yourself over and over and over again. So you couldn't live like that, right? You would forget the name of your partner every time he or she went out of your, you know, visual, you know, purview. Oh, hi, Cindy. Oh, who are you? Who are you? You know, there are people like this, right? Who's that guy? Oliver Stone? Oliver Sacks. Oliver Stone. Oliver Sacks writes books about people like this. You know, the man who ate his hat or whatever it was. Okay, so it can't really be factual memory that they're talking about. It couldn't survive like that. So then it must be what Krishnamurti called psychological memory. Psychological memory. Because the enlightened state is a radical shift in identity. Okay? You will no longer be you when you're a Buddha or when you reach samadhi or when, see? And who was it? Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche said that's going to be like the ego's greatest disappointment, is that it won't be there to see the spectacle of you entering enlightenment. I made it. Yeah. Okay? So that kind of memory, the memory that defines us as particular discrete persons, the memory that constitutes an imaginary sense of self, individual self, that memory maybe has to go as part of the project of, you know, finding out what an-atman really means, no self, and identify with that rather than with the little individuals that we all think we are. Yeah, you want to wait until just, no, thanks, because I don't even know what I'm saying next. Oh yeah. Here's from the Yoga Sutra. These are just a couple of, you know, quotations from very famous Indian texts that seem to indicate that memory, has to go. Yoga, yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. If you're in yoga, interested in yoga and you don't know this is the definition of yoga. Everyone should know this. So, as many people have observed, the whole problem with translating this verse depends on how to translate the term vritti. Yoga is yoga. Chitta is mind. Everyone agrees with that. Nirodha always means cessation or stopping, no problem. But then what is it that yoga is supposed to stop in my mind? And here I put habitual patterns. I often translate it as turbulence. But just to make a point here, because you can translate it as habitual patterns. Vritti comes from a Sanskrit root that means to turn over and over and over again. So you could say it's the churning of the mind, okay? Or the remembering over and over and over again. Yeah, oh, this is what you said to me. Remember. When that and so yoga, it means stopping that, stopping the churning, stopping the memory. When that happens, the seer abides in his or her true nature, their swarupa. And, maybe it seems to me very likely that what they're talking about here is kind of the same thing that they talk about in Buddhism as Buddha nature. Or your pure consciousness, or what are some other words for these things? Same thing. It's just words. These are all just names for the pristine state, right? For the state of absolute happiness, for the state of tranquility, of absolute peace. So when the vrittis stop, you are left with, your own true nature, your own peace, which is not your individual sense of self. It's the cosmic self. It's the massive, kind of all-encompassing sense of belonging and communing. But the vrittis have to stop for you to access that. Otherwise, he says in the fourth verse, one identifies with the habitual patterns. Or, if I was going to cheat a little bit, I'd say you identify with your memories. Because we are who we think we once were. Okay? If you don't remember anything else from the talk, try to remember that. Is that true? I've thought about it for many years. I think it's absolutely true. Who could we be otherwise? As individuals, you see, as particular discrete individuals with all the problems thereof, all the problems of the sense of, of alienation from each other and from the world around us, all the problems that we have, can be traced to the grasping on to the illusory sense of the individual self. And memory is absolutely crucial to that. Okay? So just as you won't, when you're enlightened, you won't be you. You won't be you because you won't have your memories. In fact, you won't have anybody's memories because you'll be living in reality, not in the past. All right, here's a couple more, and then we'll finish up. This is Nagarjuna. Freedom comes from the destruction of karma and mental afflictions. Karma and klesha, okay? You will not get enlightened by improving your karma, okay? Some people are unclear on that. Some people think, well, if I'm really, really good and generous and create all kinds of good karma, then I'll sort of like build my karmic machine and drive it into nirvana or enlightenment. No authentic Indian tradition has ever said anything other than karma is the problem, not the solution. Okay? The point is to get out of karma, which means to get out of compulsive activity. Compulsive, the need to do things over and over and over again because we've done them that way over and over and over again. That's what karma is. It's a cycle over and over. It's memory. And then klesha, the emotional habitual responses. So, if anybody's unclear on that, you can just say, well, Nagarjuna says, and he's not the only one. Karma and mental afflictions, are what keeps us unfree. Karma and mental afflictions comes from conceptual thought. So you could say that karma and mental afflictions exist kind of the same way everything else does, as an idea, as a concept. They aren't any more real than anything else, in other words. You see what I mean? And from the projection of them. And projection comes to an end in emptiness. So this Nagarjuna is saying, indicating, at least pointing in the direction, to freedom, to nirvana, which means dropping habitual ways of thinking and acting. In other words, dropping memory. This is from the guide. Truth about reality is considered to be two kinds, deceptive and ultimate. This is from the 9th chapter on wisdom. How things really are is inaccessible to the intellect. For the intellect is said to be deceptive. So just as you can't work your way into nirvana, enlightenment, moksha, or whatever, you can't think your way into it either. You can't get really, really dharmically intelligent and then finally reach the 160 IQ threshold or something. Get it now, I'm enlightened. See, conceptual thought is the problem, not the solution. Ultimately, we are imprisoned by our own minds. We are imprisoned by our own habits of conceptualizing things the same way we've conceptualized them over and over and over again, and then thinking that the things are how we conceptualize them. We do not confront reality as it is. We confront reality as we are. See what I mean? Yeah. This is from Atisha's Lamp for the Path of Awakening, this sort of Ur-Lam Rim, actually, in Sanskrit. Having used wisdom to intellectually examine all things. And so, he's saying, okay, well, don't be an airhead. It's important to study. It's important to use your mind. It's important to learn. Having used wisdom, so here he's talking about conceptual wisdom, to intellectually examine all things and finding no inherent nature in them. So you use your mind to convince yourself that things can't exist the way they seem. They are empty of having the kind of reality that they seem to have. One should then meditate on wisdom in a non-conceptual way. Okay, without using concepts, without using thoughts or ideas. Then he says, this is very interesting, this world has come into being through concepts, which is true. For each and every one of us, our world exists conceptually only. Okay? Conceptually. Yeah, it's come into existence through concepts and thus exists purely conceptually. The abandonment of all such conceptual thinking is the highest nirvana. And I could give you 5 or 6 statements like that from other texts. Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, that's kind of like a regular kind of riff. If you want to get enlightened, stop thinking. But you can't, which would be kind of easy for some of us, to just go brain dead or something like that, or right? That's not what they mean. You got to go back to the earlier verse there. Having used wisdom to intellectually examine all things, so having done the hard yards, intellectually, having worked it out with your mind, then you have to drop the working out of the mind. You have to drop it because the mind becomes a problem rather than a solution. You have to unlearn. Yeah, and many of us have a lot to unlearn. Yoga Sutra 143. When memory is purified, see the Sanskrit there? Smriti parishuddha, a locative of shuddha, smriti. When memory is purified, a non-conceptual state of mind appears, which is empty of having any self-nature, and which focuses on only itself as the object of thought. Here he's talking about what is sometimes called the direct perception of ultimate reality. Okay? And how does that happen? Well, it can't happen conceptually, because conceptually, by definition, is indirect. Okay? You're not having a direct perception of reality when you're having conceptual understandings of reality, because your concepts are in the way, right? So you drop the concepts, and how does that happen? Look what he says. Purify memory. Purified, could go a lot of different ways, but it seems like there's only, to me, what he's talking about is erasing memory. Purifying it in the sense of erasing it. Because then you don't have any concepts to deal with when memory is purified. Because memory and concepts go hand in hand. This is from the Ashtavakra Gita. Know that everything is only a projection. The true self is free and eternal. So it is that the wise man behaves like a child. I picked this out of the Gita. This is a very interesting text too. Someday, you all should study it. I picked this out because, well, what would an experience, not meditative, a non-meditative, just ordinary everyday life experience be if we dropped conceptuality? Okay, if we weren't like trying to organize everything into our classes and categories and classifications, right? And I think this one points to it. And this text is not the only one. Be like children. The wise man, the enlightened person, is like a child. He behaves like a child. Jesus said the same thing, right? Be like children. In the Tao Te Ching, it says the same thing. Many times, actually. Be simple like children. So what's the deal about children? They have to be talking about a young enough child, okay? Like pretty much before language. So what's that, 2, 3 at most? Where everything is seen with the eyes of wonder. Everything is new. Everything is just interesting because they haven't like applied the categories to it. Okay, that's just another toy. It's toy. You know what I mean? They're seeing the world fresh, with fresh eyes, and that's kind of a non-conceptual way of experiencing the world. The awestruckness that children have about the world around us, requires being dumbstruck. Dumbstruck means you don't say nothing. You don't put it into language. You don't categorize it. Oh, this is the direct perception of emptiness. If you say this is the direct perception of emptiness, you are not having the direct perception. Okay? Because it cannot be named. And that's the same with everything. You see? The spiritual life isn't to go to Never Land. The spiritual life is to appreciate the miraculous wonders moment to moment living. And we can't do that with our samsaric, our afflicted way of thinking and responding to the world. And much of that, it seems to me, comes from memory. So what happens when we drop memory? What would happen? Because we're talking about the goal, really, the enlightened state. So what would happen? Well, you'd be like a child. You would see the world like a child does and respond to the world like a child does. And so this is the last, I think this is my last PowerPoint presentation. The Buddhist tradition, Mahayana Buddhist tradition says that that's kind of what Buddhahood is like too. I just picked a couple. I did a word search. If you do a word search of this text, the Uttara Tantra, and of course this is my own translation, so I'm searching my own translations, but I searched uncontrived, spontaneous. It just occurs over and over again. The Buddhas have no memory. Buddhas don't have any memory. They are always acting in an uncontrived manner, which means no planning, no forethought. I searched a bunch too. No forethought. It's just it's not like Buddhas are sitting there on Alpha Centauri going, I should really save some people on Earth, and they go in their Buddha mobile and come down, No thought like that, you see. No forethought. No memory, no planning, completely spontaneous, like children, who also don't have much forethought, do they? No. And then they're really apprehending the world as it is, because the world is constantly changing. The world of form is constantly changing, and it will always be constantly changing. That's what form is. See, so, Buddhas are, supposed to be, among us, but they are apprehending the world in a completely different way. They're not apprehending it through preconceived ideas, through concepts, let alone through habitual emotional responses. They are living fully in the present, in the here and now, without thinking, okay? Non-conceptually. As soon as you start conceptualizing things, you are no longer living in the here and now, as it is, the world as it is. So I personally find all this kind of interesting. I hope you did too. The traditions are not saying, by the way, just forget everything. They're not saying that. It's important to remember. It's important to learn. It's important to remember our mistakes so we can learn from them. It's important to remember the teachings that we've been fortunate enough to have. It's important to remember, okay? That's what mindfulness is. Remembering to remember, to pay attention. It's important to remember. But at the same time, we should at least sometimes practice what it feels like to forget. If we're serious about reaching the goals that these traditions hold out to us, then we should pay attention at least to the times when we are not remembering, when we have forgotten to remember, when we've forgotten ourselves, when we are unmindful, okay? When we are not mindful, when we are not sort of sitting around going, what about me, how's my body, how's my feelings? And those times we have, fortunately, we have with some regularity, we have experiences where we transcend ourselves, where we get out of ourselves, where we lose ourselves. People do this in music. People do this in dance. People do this in drugs and alcohol sometimes. People do this in all kinds of ways. But so in sexual orgasm, there's all kinds of potential experiences for that if we paid attention to them, we would have some better idea of the state that we're striving for when we strive for the goal in these traditions. Unself-conscious, non-conceptual, no sense of self-consciousness about that. You see, you lose yourself. You lose yourself in reality as it's happening. And maybe that's what Buddhahood is. Maybe that's what Buddhahood is, no memory. So anyway, the Dalai Lama, I've heard the Dalai Lama do this many, many times. He often says, if there's anything that you heard tonight that was of use to you, very good. And if not, just forget about it. So, just forget about it. So we have time for discussion, maybe a little bit. We'll start with the live group, and then we'll see if the remote people have anything to say.
I have a question.
Yeah, JJ.
You got me kind of nervous about the fact of being let go of the open memory. So can you talk to me about that a little bit and tell me, sometimes you just want to escape.
Yeah.
And in your circle there, you're pretty high up on things not to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the contradiction. I mean, the spiritual life is often like this. In fact, in my experience, teaching in general is like this. I had, used to teach at the University of California, Riverside, and I would find myself, having maybe an introductory lecture course in the morning and saying something, and then saying the complete opposite to the graduate seminar in the afternoon. Right? So, it's like that. It's kind of like you build a foundation. It's like a ladder. You climb up one rung and after another. But once you've climbed up the bottom rungs, you don't need them anymore. So you let them go. So that's my understanding of what these traditions are teaching about memory and mindfulness too. Memory and mindfulness are very, very important, preliminary instruments, methods. But they will not, in and of themselves, get you enlightened. Right? So, the Buddha once said, the Dharma is like a raft. So, you take the raft in order to go across a river or something like that. But when you get to the other side of the river, you don't carry your raft around. The raft has served its purpose. So those kinds of teachings, they serve their purpose. And then, then the project is, changes, becomes something else. Maybe even the opposite. To learn how to forget instead of remember, to unlearn instead of to learn. And I think, this is, I think, the case with a lot of us in the modern, in modern Western context that these traditions have come into, because we're all so very overeducated and over-informed, actually, more and more and more all the time. And because we've had the privilege and the opportunity to be educated, and then to have access to all of this, like, massive, unfathomable amount of data at our fingertips now, we tend to get very, very attached to the mind, very, very attached to mastery, intellectual mastery, and, knowing all this right stuff, knowing all the news, knowing all this, all that. And I am unaware of any spiritual tradition that says that you can think your way like that into the enlightened state. You have to let it go. So in our case, I think the challenge is maybe even greater than in the past, to unlearn, to let go of our reliance on the intellect, on the concepts, on the figuring theories, figuring it all out, thinking that we can figure it all out. And but I think that is part of the challenge. It's part of the challenge to try to figure it out. But it's also part of the challenge to recognize the limitations, and then to work on the sort of other end of things, or, the opposite, to unlearn, to let go of the idea that we can capture everything in our concepts. Yeah?
I was just thinking, when you were talking about not remembering, I was actually thinking that older people who have forgotten everything and who are happy. I mean, who are really happy. And then I was thinking of like those situations where you get angry at someone, and then the next time you come together with them, it looks like the same fight's going to happen.
Yeah.
But you have to. So I was just thinking, so then I was thinking, well, then forgiveness comes with forgetting.
No, everyone almost always says that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything to forgive. So it's not a matter of forgetting, but it's a matter, you could say, it's not about forgetting what happened, but it's a matter of, letting go of your habitual, kind of tendency to revive it all the time in your mind, to hang on to it, to let that go, to forget it in that sense, to let it go, but not to forget that it happened.
So the memory of that go.
No, not the memory of the experience. The habitual response to the memory of the experience, which is resentment and anger over and over and over. But the experience itself is, potentially empty of any emotional quality. The emotional quality of the experience is added, right? Oh, this made me so mad, or this hurt me so much. It actually was just a phenomenon. It was just something that happened. And, so it's not like forgetting that happened to you. That's, I think, what Krishnamurti means, factual memory. That stuff happened to you. You were born in a certain place. You went to school with certain kind of people. These things happen. But to grasp onto that as if that was, that is me now, that may be the problem. You see, memories can be changed, and that, I think, is part of the self-improvement process. I think it's a very big part of the self-improvement process, is to rehabilitate your memories. And instead of saying, for example, oh, you hurt me so much by doing X, Y, or Z, instead of saying that and saying, because you did X, Y, or Z, I learned so much. So then it's not that X, Y, or Z didn't happen, but you cast a whole different kind of understanding of the memory for the present, Yeah, and then what was the other thing I was going to say? Something else. What was I talking about? Memories. Oh yeah. So you could say it's like maybe a two-part process. The first part is to rehabilitate your memories, and as part of that process, to try to live in the present in such a way that you're giving yourself better memories for the future, right? Because every moment of our lives, we're creating new memories for our future ourselves, right? So that's the whole idea of living an ethical life and trying to be a good person, is so that you'll feel better about yourself, you see, in the future. So that's a kind of two parts of the same job. but ultimately, if we're really serious about kind of going for for the gold here, ultimately it's a process of detaching from the idea of the self, detaching from the idea that me say my name to myself is who I really am. Who I really am is greater than that. Who I really am has never been born and so will never die. Who I really am is unchanging. And to try to get in touch with that deeper sense of our true identity, memory is getting in the way. Jenny.
I was just wondering, it seems like everything, all the problems and everything start from like yourself. So you can't have such memories of yourself. So I'm almost thinking it's almost, they're not only rare by stuff, but they are caused by the self.
Caused by the self?
Caused by the sense of the self.
Yeah, but where does the sense of the self come from? If not from memories, you see?
Like the no memories happen down the line. You only have a memory because you have a self. You didn't have a concept of the self. I'm thinking about the 8 steps of I'm forgetting the name of the
Dependent origination. Yeah.
Right? It starts with the idea of I.
Yeah.
And I is separate from everything else.
Well, the problem with that is that it's actually a circle, so there's no start. It's not linear. So yeah. Yeah.
So if I don't know one thing, I'm not existing. No self.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yes, Peter.
I heard another teacher say that knowledge is the collection of memory.
Okay, that's interesting.
So if we're to access our deeper selves, the Atman or the true self, isn't the acquiring of knowledge get in the way of that?
At a certain point, it does. I mean, you know, again, it's not simply a matter of like, you know, banging your head with a hammer so you don't think anymore and then you'll be fine. We have to learn how to stop thinking because we've thought so much in the past. We have to learn how to unlearn because we've already learned. You can't unlearn unless you've learned. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the path is filled with examples like this, where at one level it's important to do one thing, and at another level it's important to do the opposite of that thing. And I think this is a case of that. It's very important to try to, you know, to learn. And knowledge, you know, is one form of learning, but then there's, you know, kind of wisdom too. And so, you know, in terms of what you were saying before, that knowledge is just a sort of bunch of memories, that could be true, you know, knowledge. But then there's wisdom. And wisdom, I think, isn't just a bunch of memories. Wisdom is something that has been imprinted in your deeper being, and is more of a way of looking at the world or being in the world rather than knowing about the world. And then there's non-conceptual wisdom, which is even deeper. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah. Is that Teddy? Hey, how you doing? I heard you moved to LA. Yeah. Yeah, nice to see you too.
It seems to me that there's a slight distinction, or that there's a difference between grasping, which is obviously problematic,
Yep.
and memory. Memory itself isn't necessarily problematic, but the grasping that those memories kind of function in a particular way, that's very problematic.
Yeah, you know, like that's another way to go. At least, you know, one possibility is when it comes to the whole question of what kind of mind would an enlightened being have? Would they have any memories at all? And maybe you could say that they have memories, but they don't believe that the memory is themselves. which is, again, I think, almost impossible for people like us to think. You know, because we have memories, we have a strong sense that there's a me. There's a me who has the memories, who's been through this before, this kind of continuous me. And that can't be what the enlightened state is, the grasping to the me. So if the grasping to the me is gone, what function would memory have in a mind like that? What would it do?
Sounds more attainable. Like that seems to be more reach. It's to be able to go to, not try and change my functioning of memory, but to work on the grasping within that. It's
Yeah.
way more in reach than trying to escape my memories.
Well, yes and no, because, you know, I personally find it very, very difficult to escape my memories, or to escape, not to escape my memories, to de-identify with my memories. I find it very difficult. I've been trying. But I have, and I think everyone has, fairly regular experiences of what it feels like to stop thinking. And which means also to not have memory, to not have concepts. Look, we do this every night we go to sleep, actually. This is why we long for, you know what a good night's sleep? A good night's sleep means you're not there for 8 hours.
About the subconscious and those memories that you don't remember, but they are there. So how are you going to escape those?
You don't remember, but they are there?
You said it. You said they were
Unconscious.
Unconscious,
Yeah.
subconscious,
Yeah.
and then there were the memories that are actually active, acting from what we actually don't remember. So not remembering is actually not going to do much for you if there are in fact other memories that you may not be conscious of that are actually driving your behavior. So it seems to me the job would be to work on letting go of the grasping within them rather than trying to erase them.
Well, it seems like you're right. I mean, if you could do it, that would get the job done. If you could do it. Yeah. Yeah, from the remote sites. Yeah, yeah, please do. Can you put them all up there, Dima? So we got people from Cape Ann, I think, Cape Ann, Saskatoon, Austin, Texas, and one person in New York City. She's the last person who can't figure out how to move to Los Angeles. Sorry?
There's another question down here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Shh.
It just occurred to me that maybe the problem that the lady over there was alluding to is not so much that you don't want to have the memory, but that you want to dissociate yourself from it. And I was thinking, you know, a lot of people say that there's value in journaling. That might be a way to do it, especially if you journal maybe in third person. You're not writing I, but you know, whatever your name is, you know, David is, you know, had this experience.
Yeah.
And then when you reread it,
Yeah.
you get the benefit of the memory, but you don't think of yourself as having it.
Yeah, nice. You know, keep in mind the whole point here, all right? The whole point is how to learn to live fully in the present. And memory precludes that. So however we can, you know, kind of get around it, the point is to live fully in the present without thinking that the present is something that's already happened, just like it used to happen, that this is the same kind of person that I've always had trouble over and over and over again, right? In order to see the world with the eyes of a child, with the eyes of wonder and awe. So however we get to that, and you know, like I said to Shadi, I personally have found it very, very difficult to disassociate myself from my memories. You know, even to like think of myself in the third person didn't help that much. But you know, maybe it'll help you. You know. But again, all to the point of, you know, living fully in the present. Okay, who do we got here? Hi, guys. Let's start with Cape Ann.
Anybody got a question? Can't hear you.
Lama Marut, can you hear me? Is this on? Oh, do you hear me?
Bob, can you hear us?
I was wondering at the beginning, you were talking about the self and that we had to do something in order to, like do it to ourselves or bring it to ourselves. Is there no self? Why are we doing it for ourselves if there's no self to do it for?
Just a matter of speaking. Hard to speak without like using the word self once in a while. There is a self, okay? The Buddha taught this, right? The Buddha taught there is a self, there is no self, and there is no self. Okay? There is a self in the sense. There is a self in the sense of like a conception of the self. We have a conception of ourselves, an idea of ourselves, but that's the only self there really is our idea of the self. So the question then is, well, why do I have the idea of myself that I do? And, I've been saying it over and over again. You guys got to think about it. Put it in your pipe and smoke it for a while. The reason that we think of ourselves the way we do is because of the memories that we're attached to. The memories that constitute ourselves. So, if you want to feel better about yourself, make better memories in the two ways that we talked about. Transform the memories that you already have. Try to see something good in what you're holding on is, just a nightmare. And then, plant new memories as you go through life, on a day-to-day basis. And then you'll feel better about yourself because we are who we think we once were. But that's all we are. And so if, the individual self is constituted by memory, then the escape from the individual self will also have to be an escape from memory. And that's the goal. Okay? There aren't particular Buddhas. There aren't particular enlightened beings. All enlightened beings are exactly the same enlightened being. They are just in touch with what is, with ultimate reality. They have identified with what is ultimate reality. And there's only one ultimate reality. So if you identify with it, no matter who's identifying with it, you're identifying with the same thing. Okay, so you lose a sense, the enlightened state, it sounds like to me, is losing a sense not only of individuality, but of separation. Okay, of feeling separate and isolated and atomistically, discrete from all the other beings in the universe and the universe itself. So, how does memory function in a mind like that? I just don't see how it can. I don't really see how it can. But on the other hand, like if there are Buddhas walking around here, in this, they must know not to touch the stove all the time, over and over and over again, right? If there are. This is also, by the way, just as a little aside, a kind of a controversy in Indian religions. Is it even possible to achieve the state that they're talking about, in this body, in this life? Mm. Is it possible? And some people say, no, actually, not possible. Because of memory, maybe. Because this body requires, for its survival, requires memory to be there. Otherwise, I'd just walk out in front of cars all the time because I never thought that, never knew that there was anything wrong with that. You see what I mean? It's very difficult. These are deep teachings, guys. Deep.
Thank you.
Deep is good. Deep is good. Lama Marut, so great to hear you tonight.
Hi, Peter. The beard's looking good.
No, I cut it this summer. But you're looking good. You're getting much better. It's good. But, the trip is that I'll have something in my pipe to smoke it, figuratively. And what is, I'd love to hear you say, and for me to understand about the aspect of impermanence. That everything is fresh.
Yeah.
And if we really live in that freshness, yeah. It's not projecting the jadedness, yeah. Like we've already been there. Yeah. And it is incurring the awe, and that awe is it's not all bliss. It can be dangerous as well. But we're not scared. We're not scared of the danger because it's all new.
Yeah.
And that's just really, I really appreciate that, to be able to put that in my pipe and smoke it tonight.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Peter.
That's so cool. That's really cool.
No, but that's what they always say, in Buddhism anyway. That's the nature of reality is that it is impermanent. And that means that it's constantly new and fresh, potentially. But we don't, ordinarily, experience it that way. So it's not, there's no problem with reality.
No, no.
The problem is our you know, inability to experience reality as it is. It is new and fresh all the time. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. We're, you know, like, it's not just Republicans who are conservatives. You know, we're all extremely conservative. You know, we fear the new, partly because the absolute new is unintelligible. Okay? And if everything, because of impermanence, is absolutely new, then everything is unintelligible. Okay? And that's what the sense of wonder is. That's what wonder is. Sometimes we're actually attracted to that, but gosh, you know, not too long, please.
Right.
You know what I mean? Want to get a handle on it, right? Yeah. So, you know, again, go back to the example of like small children who, you know, who are seeing things literally for the first time. And not having names for them, not having labels, not having you know, sort of conceptions about it, and they really are examples to us of how we can try to live ourselves in that kind of moment-to-moment, you know, way of appreciation of the new, of the unexperienced. Anyone else at Cape Ann have a question?
Hello, Lama Marut. I have a comment, if you could bear with me. Hello. In terms of memory, before you came on, we were remembering here the summer retreats. and how wonderful it was for all of us to gather, especially here in Massachusetts. So we're remembering that, but we're also forgetting and not clinging and saying, it's like this now. It's like this now. We don't have the summer retreat, but we do have the great experience of having you live from LA. So thank you so much for this beautiful teaching.
You know, she just mentioned the phrase, it's like this now. I've been like using it as a kind of a mantra for many years now. As a way to try to keep us in the present moment. It's like this now. But actually, you know, on the base, you know, after 2 hours of talking, it's actually, the mantra has to be examined a little bit. It's like this now, but it's not this now. Because you see, because as soon as we say that it's like this now, we've got our categories. Oh, it's this thing, it's that thing, and you know, like that. So it's not really now, let alone like the whole time factor, which is a problem. As soon as you say it's like this now, it's not now anymore, right? But it's useful. It's a useful, you know, kind of thing. It's not accurate quite though. It's like this now, but it's not this. Yeah. Shall we go to, is there anyone from the other remote sites that has anything to say? Try Austin, maybe.
Can you guys hear us?
Yeah.
Is that Austin?
Yeah. Right there, guys.
Hey, Carl.
Hi.
Hi, Denise. Hi, guys. You have any?
Perhaps it's new now.
It's new now, yeah. Now, just it's now. Yeah.
So now it's newer.
You guys have any questions or comments other than that?
Yeah, let's move that on. No, we don't have any. Thanks.
Oh, wait, Nick.
Yeah. Oh, Nick has one. This is Nick.
I have a question that touches on three topics: karma, emptiness, and tantra. So, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Closer. I looked right up on it.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
We don't hear them.
No.
I
Go ahead.
think they lost.
Okay.
Oh, there we
So to repeat, I would like to ask a question about 3 topics: karma, emptiness, and tantra. So karma, as you've said before, necessarily must ripen, right? We have an imprint that hits our mind, it's our memory, and it necessarily will affect us. But then, as you've also pointed out, we can hold paradoxical views. So must ripen needs to be qualified. Can we affect or avoid karmic repercussions by seeing emptiness and by practicing tantra? Specifically, like imagining ourselves as deities, does that then transform us literally into deities because now we have the memories of deities? Is that the point? Is that how it all fits together?
No more learning. Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're totally onto it. You know, there can only be karmic imprints if there's a sense of self that is being imprinted upon. So both Tantra and emptiness are trying to get us to the realization that there is no self that is doing anything, actually. Okay? So with selfless action, there is no karmic imprint because there's nothing to imprint. So, you know, there's all kinds of ways to get to that. You know, understanding emptiness has to be deep enough to understand the emptiness of the self in order for it not to result in order for it to result in not producing any karma anymore. And, you know, what they call deity yoga in Tantra of like embodying the being of an enlightened being means that you're not you anymore. If you're going to do that properly in a way that you know escapes karma, and by the way, would it escape negative karma? Because if you say your name to yourself, go around thinking I am Buddha, you know that's a really huge act of hubris. You know what I mean? So you have to, in order to reach that same sense of selflessness and karma-lessness, the identification has to be absolute with the deity. So you lose yourself in a deity, in a representation of Buddhahood, and then there's no more karma either. And there's lots of different methods to this. In the Bhagavad Gita, they teach karma yoga. Karma yoga is another method to continue to act in the world, but without creating karmic reaction. So what's the trick? And it's the idea of action without attention to the fruits of action, which means selfless action. Action done for its own sake, not for what I'm going to get out of it as an actor. And then again, it's karma-less action. That's karma-less action. But any action that's done with self-interest involved is guaranteed, according to the karmic system, to bring about a karmic reaction and keep us in suffering, ultimately. So even you know, trying to be a nice person, you know, I try to be a nice person so that people will like me or whatever, is, you know, already, you know, kind of an impure karmic act because it's driven by a personal motivation, by a selfish motivation. Better than being a crappy person, by the way. But thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Let's go to, who's Joshua? That must be Saskatoon.
Hi, Lamaji.
That was Ursilia. Trying to get a word in that twice.
Lamaji, I just want to say thank you for explaining to me how why I practice the art of forgetting so well. Thank you for that. It was a very powerful teaching tonight.
For practicing the art of what? Sorry, Ursilia, I missed it.
Forgetfulness.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. What about Saskatoon?
They can talk. They need to say something.
Saskatoon, if you can hear me, go ahead and say something so we can get you online here. Somehow.
Hi, Lama Marut.
There you are.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, we don't really have any questions. We really appreciate the talk.
Can't hear.
We don't have any questions, but we really appreciate the talk.
Okay, I could hear that. Thanks so much for joining us. It's nice to have you with us. All right, I guess that's it. That's all the remote guys. So thanks for coming tonight. And it's really good to be back in LA with you. I have very fond memories of LA. No, that's true. I forgot to open the whole conversation like that. You know, because when I come back to LA, I see LA positively because of the fond memories that I have of it. And there's plenty of other places where it's a little different than that. Anyway, it's good to be with you all. Thank you for coming. Huh?